September 1944. Eastern France. American troops had encircled a German garrison entrenched inside a fortified stronghold. Massive stone walls, artillery positions, machine gun nests covering every possible avenue of approach. Inside the fortress were roughly 1,500 German soldiers, commanded by a major who had openly declared he would never surrender to the Americans. General Patton sent an officer forward under a white flag. The message was direct and professional. Surrender immediately, prevent pointless loss of life, and your men would be taken as prisoners of war in accordance with the Geneva Convention. The German major's reply was theatrical and absolute. Tell General Patton that if he wants this fortress, he will have to kill me to take it. It was meant to sound fearless, defiant, the kind of line that stiffens spines and intimidates attackers. Patton's answer was only 4 words. I can arrange that. What followed was not a siege. It was not a drawn-out fight. It was a deliberate, methodical annihilation that ended in less than 12 hours, and it demonstrated that Patton took men at their word. If you ever wonder what happens when you challenge Patton to do exactly what he intended to do anyway, you're about to find out. The German position was no improvised defense. It was a true fortress, one of many built centuries earlier and scattered across the French countryside. Thick masonry walls, elevated ground with natural defensive strength, narrow access routes covered by overlapping fields of fire, underground rooms capable of surviving artillery bombardment, a well inside the walls providing a steady water supply. The garrison consisted of around 1,500 troops, battle-worn infantry, artillery crews, and officers from various units that had fallen back into the fortress as American forces advanced. On paper, it was a stronghold. A direct assault would be expensive. A siege could drag on for weeks. The logical move might have been to bypass it, leave a containment force behind, and push forward. But this fortress controlled a critical road junction, and that made it unavoidable. Leaving the fortress under German control meant American supply columns would be forced onto longer, less efficient detours. It was a problem that couldn't be ignored. It had to be removed. Patton's approach was consistent. He always offered surrender first, not out of softness, though he was not needlessly brutal, but out of pure practicality. A surrendered enemy position costs no American lives and no time. A contested one costs both. So he delivered his ultimatum. Straightforward terms. Lay down your arms. You will be treated properly. Sent to a POW camp. You live to see the war end. The alternative was a battle the Germans could not win, one that would spill blood on both sides. The German major rejected the offer, and he didn't just say no. He framed his refusal around honor, duty, and a sworn promise never to surrender. Then he made it personal. If Patton wanted the fortress, he would have to kill him to take it. Many commanders might have taken that as a chance to bargain. Offer revised terms, argue that surrender under these conditions wasn't disgraceful, try to talk the man down. Patton didn't see an opening for discussion. He saw a statement of intent. The major had declared exactly how he wanted this to end. Patton intended to oblige, quickly and decisively. When the messenger returned with the major's words, Patton's staff anticipated irritation, maybe fury, perhaps an order to bypass the position and deal with it later. Instead, Patton was calm, almost clinical. Officers who were there later recalled his response as brutally practical. The major says we have to kill him. Let's not let him down. Then the orders began, clear, thorough, and designed to accomplish precisely what the German commander had dared him to do, in the most efficient manner possible. First came total encirclement, not just roadblocks, but a complete seal. No movement in, no movement out. If the water supply could be cut, it would be. The fortress might be strong, but the men inside still depended on food, water, and eventually reinforcement. They would receive none. Second, Patton ordered every heavy artillery unit within range to sight in on the fortress. This would not be a blind barrage. It would be deliberate, calculated fire. Thick stone walls could shrug off rifles and machine guns, but they would not withstand sustained strikes from 155mm artillery. Subterranean rooms could shield men from fragments, but a direct strike would bring the ceilings down on them. Patton knew that. Third, he called for air support. Not general-purpose fighter bombers scattering explosives, but ground attack aircraft armed with precision weapons. Their targets were carefully selected. Key buildings inside the fortress complex, the command headquarters, artillery emplacements, and ammunition stores. Then came a detail that revealed Patton's grasp of psychological warfare. He ordered loudspeakers move forward. The Germans inside would be informed of exactly what was about to happen, not as a threat, but as a timetable. At this hour, artillery fire. At this hour, air attacks. At this hour, the ground assault. Give them time to think. Give them time to understand that their commander's dramatic refusal was about to cost every one of them their lives. Patton also made his intent unmistakable to his own officers. This would not be a slow, cautious operation designed to minimize enemy losses. The German major had demanded a fight. He would get one, but it would be crushing, relentless, and perfectly synchronized. The objective was speed. Finish it in hours, not days. The message passed down to the troops was just as blunt. The enemy had been offered honorable surrender. They declined. What followed was a consequence of their decision. The attack began at dawn, not out of tradition, but because Patton wanted the defenders awake all night, fully aware of what was coming. The loudspeakers had already broadcast the schedule. The men inside the fortress knew that at first light the guns would speak. They had hours to sit with that knowledge, hours for doubt to creep in, hours for the less committed soldiers to question their commander's choice, hours for morale to erode. When the sun finally rose, the artillery opened exactly as promised. This was not scattered shelling. It was carefully coordinated fire, with batteries assigned to specific segments of the fortress walls. The purpose wasn't merely destruction. It was systematic dismantling of the defenses. The walls were thick, several feet of solid stone, capable of absorbing punishment. But Patton had positioned heavy artillery for a reason. Those guns existed to break fortifications. And they went to work. Round after round smashed into the same stretches of wall, widening gaps, forming breakpoints, and exposing the fortress interior. German artillery attempted to answer back, but American counter-battery fire was swift and deadly accurate. Each time a German gun revealed itself, American shells followed within minutes. The crews learned quickly. Returning fire was a death sentence. After 2 hours of sustained shelling, the air attacks commenced. 47 Thunderbolts came in carrying 500-pound bombs. This was not area bombing. These were precision strikes against pre-selected targets. The Major's command center absorbed 3 direct hits. The ammunition depot was struck next, setting off secondary explosions that shook the entire fortress. The main gate was blown completely free of its hinges. Throughout the bombardment, the loudspeakers never went silent. They narrated events as they unfolded, announced the next phase, and offered one final opportunity to surrender before the infantry assault. The message was clear. Anyone who wanted to live could come out with hands raised and would be treated properly. Some listened. At first, a handful of German soldiers emerged, then dozens more. They slipped through shattered walls with their hands in the air, walking toward American lines, choosing survival over their commander's oath. The Major tried to reassert control. He ordered soldiers attempting to surrender shot as traitors. Instead of restoring discipline, it shattered what little morale remained. The men inside understood the truth. They were caught between overwhelming American firepower and a fanatical commander willing to kill his own troops. By mid-morning, the fortress was in ruins, multiple breaches torn through the walls, artillery positions wiped out, the command structure crippled by the destruction of the headquarters. Then the American infantry moved in, not from a single direction, but through every breach at once. Sherman tanks advanced to point-blank range, firing directly into the openings. Flamethrower teams cleared bunkers. Combat engineers used demolition charges to eliminate the remaining strong points. And yet, the assault was not the chaotic, grinding struggle fortress battles often became. It was controlled, methodical, almost mechanical. Patton's preparation had stripped the defenders of the ability to fight effectively. German resistance was fragmented and confused. Small pockets resisted briefly, then surrendered, The major's threats to execute deserters no longer mattered. The fortress was finished. There was no functioning chain of command left to enforce those threats. American troops cleared the fortress methodically, moving from one section to the next. Loudspeakers advanced with them, broadcasting surrender messages in German, promising safety to anyone who put down their weapons, and making it unmistakably clear that continued resistance meant death, not glory. The major himself was discovered in the ruins of his command bunker. He had sealed himself inside with a small group of loyal soldiers. When American troops broke into the position, he reportedly raised his pistol toward them. An American sergeant fired and killed him. There was no grand speech, no dramatic final stand, just a professional act that ended the danger. The major had declared that Patton would have to kill him to take the fortress. That is exactly how it ended. The soldiers who remained with him surrendered immediately. They had followed orders to the last moment, but once their commander was gone, they had no desire to die alongside him. From the opening artillery barrage to the final capitulation, the entire operation lasted less than 12 hours. American losses were remarkably light. Only a handful of wounded from scattered German fire, with no fatalities. Careful planning and overwhelming force had stripped the battle of any prolonged struggle. German losses, by contrast, were heavy. The major was dead, as he had promised. Roughly 200 other German soldiers were killed, mostly during the bombardment and the closing assault. About 300 more were wounded. The remaining 1,000 surrendered and were taken prisoner. When American intelligence officers examined the fortress afterward, they uncovered signs of how close the garrison had been to breaking even before the attack began. Notes from junior officers questioning the decision to resist. Evidence that soldiers had been executed for trying to surrender. Clear indicators that morale had already collapsed days earlier. The major believed his defiance would rally his men. Instead, it destroyed them. Instead, his defiance had locked his men into a hopeless position under a commander who preferred their deaths to surrender. Patton inspected the fortress the following day. Officers who accompanied him later noted that he showed no triumph, no sense of celebration. He was blunt and unemotional. The major said we would have to kill him. We did. That's what happens when you dare someone to carry out what they intended to do anyway. Yet, Patton made a deliberate point during that visit. He stopped to see wounded German prisoners and personally ensured they were receiving proper medical treatment. American medics were ordered to care for German wounded alongside American casualties. Patton wanted his troops to understand the distinction clearly. Once the fighting ended, prisoners were to be treated humanely. There was no contradiction in this. It was central to Patton's outlook on war. Be merciless in battle. Be disciplined in victory. Destroy enemies who continue to resist. Protect those who surrender. Never confuse the two. News of the fortress spread rapidly through both armies. For American soldiers, it reinforced what they already believed about Patton. He relied on overwhelming force when required, but he always offered surrender first. The German commander had been given repeated opportunities to give up. His death was the consequence of his own decision, not an act of American cruelty. For German forces, the lesson was harsher and far more unsettling. The story wasn't simply that the fortress had fallen. Strong points fell all the time. It was the manner of its destruction, the completeness, the precision. Patton had taken the major's challenge at face value and carried it out step by step. 12 hours of coordinated firepower had turned a formidable position into rubble. German commanders began passing the story along as a warning. When American units, especially Third Army formations, offered surrender terms, those offers were to be taken seriously. Refusing them meant Patton would do exactly what he said he would do. No embellishment, no hesitation, just overwhelming efficiency. Some German officers later admitted during interrogations that they surrendered to American forces specifically because they had heard about the fortress. They had learned that Patton's warnings were not bargaining positions. They were statements of fact. They weren't threats. They were facts. Challenge him, and he would respond. Dare him to wipe you out, and he would do exactly that. This was psychological warfare at its most effective, not built on propaganda or exaggeration, but on consistency. Patton said what he meant, and he followed through every time. The fortress battle also confirmed something German intelligence had already observed about American operations under Patton's command. His forces applied overwhelming power when required, but exercised restraint when surrender was an option. Their violence was not random. It was conditional. They were ruthlessly efficient only against enemies who chose to keep fighting. That predictability was, in many ways, more frightening than chaos. You knew precisely what would happen if you rejected surrender. You knew how Patton would answer defiance. The decision was yours, and so were the consequences. With hindsight, it's worth asking what the German major's defiance actually achieved. He believed he was defending honor, proving that not every embittered officer would yield quietly, forcing the Americans to pay for their advance. What he truly accomplished was far more grim. 200 of his men were killed. 300 more were wounded. The remaining 1,000 were marched off to prisoner-of-war camps. All of it for a position that held for less than a single day and delayed Patton's advance by perhaps 12 hours. Had he accepted the original surrender terms, every one of those 1,500 soldiers would have lived. They would have spent the rest of the war in comparatively safe POW camps. Many would have returned home once the fighting ended. Instead, hundreds were dead or permanently injured. And for what? The fortress still fell. The road junction was in American hands by nightfall. Patton's offensive continued with no meaningful interruption. This is a harsh arithmetic of war, something idealistic commanders often overlook. Heroic last stands make compelling stories, but they do not alter outcomes when faced with overwhelming force. They only raise the body count. The major believed his defiance would matter, that his readiness to die would inspire his men and make the Americans hesitate. Patton didn't hesitate. He simply applied more force. I Eskahani main ek leadership lesson Chupahai Joe surf battlefield tax simit nai high. Jab AAP dramatic batain cardio. You'll have to kill me. Over my dead body. I'll never surrender. To apko tayar renacheki sami wala apki bakeo bilkul literal lu. Kyanki kuch log isa high cardi hain. Patton unhigh logon main esi ekta. Us in defiant challenges KO negotiation, ki shurit nahi mana. Us in unhi choice samja. Tum KH rai ho tum out takla nachat ho. Thik high. Wo arrange ki aja sakta high. German major any yebat bahutter se samji. Uski soldiers any is sabak KO apni janya zadi ki kimat parsika. Lekin dusser German commanders any kahani suni or jab surrender offer hui. To unhon except Carly. September 1944, main fortress Gurgaya. German Major Wahin Mara, Bilkul Ways High Jesus and Kahada. AAJ Eskanam Zayadalagan Keo Yad Nahi. Fortress Key, exact Jagabiatni main Nahi Rakti. Joe main Rakta High, Wo High Lesson. Patton Kasami Dramatic Defiance Ka, Matlab Delay Nahi Hodada. Uska Matlab Hodadi, Aglaphase, or Zayada Intense Haga. Kuch Commander Shade. You'll have to kill me. Sun Kar Neraz Ho Jate. Better terms offer Cardi. Your casualties Kem Rockney Kalia Careful Operation Kalate. Patton any Isa Kuch Nahi Kia. Us use preference mana and Uski Mutabic Action Leah. Ismain Ek Thandi. Almost mathematical logic T. Major any apni Shartine Kud Bada DT. Surf Mount High you surrender car with Sakti High. Patton any wo Shartine efficiently or professionally Puri Car D. Major KO Bilkul Waimila Joas Mangada. AAJ viewers Kalia ya uncomfortable Sawa Thada High. Kia Patton KO or Zayada convince Karna Chaida. Kia use Gshiace Admi KO Mar main Hitchkichahat Daikani Chaiti Jo Asal. Main soldier Karut main suicide Karada. Yafur Patton Saida. Log Joe Kate Hain. You seriously Lena or Joe app the decision Luchuk Hain unparwak Barbad na Karna? Shea Jawab Opki leadership or responsibility could Nazarai par depend Karta high. Lekin result clear high. Major any ka. You'll have to kill me. Patton any kia. Or hard German commander Jisnya Kahani Suni. Us American negotiators Esi Bak Kardi Whacked Apni laughs and Parbahut, Zayada Dine Dina Siklia. Kyanki Patton Kasa challenges deterrence Nahi Ota, Wo permission Ota, AAP Kia Sakti Ho. Kia Patton KO Major KO Zinda Rockney Kalia or Koshish Karnich IT. Your firm major key mount usky apne file conatijati. Comments main apne rise zero leaky. Or agar AAP leadership, responsibility, or dramatic statements could consequences par or can ni in chatho. To subscribe Karnamat Bully. Milt Hain, Ego Video Main.